So in the previous video, we talked about the first element of imperial democracy. Now, if we continue to think along the line of a revolution, we will come to the unified conclusion that the true sovereign power belongs not to the ruling body, but to the people. So this is the second characteristic of Confucius democracy. To this end, Mencius said, the most important element is the people. The state is, in fact, the next, and the ruler is the least. So what does that mean? Well, it means that to gain the mass of people is the way to become emperor. To gain the emperor is the way to become a prince of a feudal state. And to gain the prince is the way to become a great official. So let's put that into a diagram in order to assist our understanding of what Mencius means. Okay, let's have a look at this. Now, in theory, the emperor is the most powerful person. So roughly speaking, his power is very similar to that of the president or the prime minister in modern days. But of course, there are many differences, right, in the scope of the authority and power possessed by the top leaders. But I think it's fair to say that they are, the single most powerful person of the country and are responsible for the overall management of the state. And this is very consistent, in fact, throughout the human history. But also, the top leaders are responsible for choosing their great officials. For instance, in Confucius' time in China, the emperor granted power to feudal princes to rule their allocated territories, and the feudal princes would then appoint their government officials to carry out government duties. Although the power vesting process is much more complicated now, the waterfall of power and responsibility is still very similar. For example, in modern UK, the Prime Minister is responsible for choosing the other members of the government, and the cabinet is made up of the most senior government ministers. And in the States, in the US, with the advice and consent from the US Senate, the President also appoints many of the positions at the highest level, such as the top officials at the government agencies, White House staff, and the members of the U.S. diplomatic corps. So, in the context of Mencius' discussion, such appointment process represents a sense of trust. In other words, the responsibility of power is vested based on the recognition and recommendations from the leader, or whoever above your pay grade. However, when it comes to the top job, i.e. the emperor and the prime minister, the appointment and recognition does not come from anybody with higher pay grade, but from the common people. Now, as you can see from earlier section, when the ruler is against human development, or the ruling body is against human development, when people do not benefit from the government, or even harmed by the government, revolution takes place, and the ruling body will lose the power. Of course, this revolution process can take various forms, right, such as impeachment, public resentment, strike, social disorder, people fleeing the country, and even war, as we have witnessed time and time again in history. So, according to Confucianism, the people is the most powerful. They have the final approval or disapproval. So, the good government should always keep the people in mind, because they can grant you the power and they can also take it back. Now, you might wonder, well, democracy sounds like a pretty good idea, and you're right, it is. But if you look at the modern world, it seems that the conflict just never stops. For example, the financial crisis takes place more regularly with wider impact, crime rate rises, regional war never take a break, income gap continues to grow, etc. Of course, this is not to say that democracy per se has anything to do with this. No. The modern interpretation of democracy is a narrow one. It puts a lot of weight on the form, but sometimes ignores the substance. Now, taking monarchy as an example. In ancient China, the emperor's line of dependents ruled the country with hereditary right. Okay. Now, leaving the issue of selfish motive aside, which is applicable to almost every human being, I would say, the emperor's career horizon was not just a few years, but generations. Now, this explained two observations in our study. Number one, the emperor made huge amounts of effort in education of his sons and grandsons, or dependents. Now, this is to ensure that his empire could thrive for not just one generation, but as many as possible. There are numerous writings in the Chinese classics about this. The sons of the emperor must not only be a capable and knowledgeable king, but also a benevolent king who treat the people as his own children. Well, surely, the hereditary right to the throne is clearly inconsistent with the modern concept of democracy, but as we have explained, the people have the final approval. When a revolution takes place, the hereditary right becomes a useless notion. So that's number one. Number two, the long career horizon had great implication in the long-term government planning. So, for instance, economic policies must take the next 100 years, for instance, into consideration as a minimum. It was simply because the prosperity of the emperor's immediate bloodline depends on it. And in contrast, when political career horizon is only 5 to 6 years, the possibility of short-termism can be quite high.